Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Pod of Inquiry, your podcast for human optimization and understanding. In this episode, I have Dr. Bill Lawrence continuing the conversation that we started on last week's episode, and we get into a little bit more on longevity as well as morbidity and mortality studies that have come out of Dr. Caveson's research in St. Petersburg, Russia. If you didn't listen to last week's episode, I'd strongly encourage you to go back, listen to that, and then come back and join this episode. So please enjoy this fascinating conversation that I have with Dr. Bill Lawrence.
Welcome to the Pod of Inquiry. Ready for some thought-provoking cerebral whipping and the destruction of ridiculous medical dogma? Want to shift those stale, moldy old paradigms? Well then, don that thinking cap of yours. Get down in the cave and join our host, Dr. Stephen Barrett, for this week's episode. Let's start spelunking.
So this is my wife, Vess, at her baseline before, this was in 2016, before she went on the bioregulators. She had slightly accelerated telomere age at 63. She was chronologically 60. And this is typically what I see with most Americans. They're a couple of years older telomere-wise. So we put her on the peptides, and there were several other tests and so forth, but I think the last test we did a couple of years ago for her, her telomeres at age 62 were equivalent to a 33-year-old. And I put this in because she's a fascinating individual. This is Vess 2 years ago. This is a 65-year-old female with the telomeres of a youngster. That's, by the way, that's not President Putin she's dancing with, but it's another Russian professional ballroom dancer. She's a competitive international ballroom dancer. But if you look at her, you would never think that she's 65 years old. So this is just one of many spreadsheets that we use in the telomere study. Over here on the left-hand side, we have what we call their telomere age. It's really a telomere equivalency. In this purple color down here was their baseline telomere age based on the testing. Their baseline age, chronological age, is right next to it there. Then their telomere percentile compared to others, the actual KB, kilobyte length. Then we retested them a couple of years later, and the yellow is the telomere age that they retested at after a couple of years. So this person that was testing here, our bishop, telomere age of 80, a couple of years later or so, had 49, was telomere as a 49-year-old. Over here on the far right, where you see the green line, you can see the results in terms of the telomere age reduction in years. And what's interesting is that this person, Bishop, had a 31-year total adjustment in their telomere age. This person below that was 18, 31, 29, 19, and so forth. But notice, though, some of these people only got a very small amount of telomere extension. This person had 3 at this point. Here's a person with 5. And down here is 2 years and so forth. So it was a widespread result for these people in terms of their telomere lengthening. And what that was due to was 2 things. One, we had, if you look over at this column where it says dosage protocol, we had people who were on different protocols, and so you would think there would be some relationship between a low protocol and fewer years, but the opposite, not the opposite, but it was not necessarily the case, because these first 2 people, the bishop, husband and wife, they were on a low dosage, and yet they had very significant, the male had a 51-year or 31-year increase, call it a reduction, okay, and the wife 18. On the other hand, we had some of these people that were on a high. I'm down here in the middle, we're looking at Nottingham. They were on a high program, but he only achieved about a 6-year difference, okay?
Right.
So what is interesting about this, and the next slide kind of demonstrates this as well. This is a bar chart of those results that I just showed you. So if you look at the difference that people achieved, and these people were on basically a similar kind of program, they were rotating through all 21 of those peptides. What's interesting about that is that I know some of these people because the people in the original coming into the clinical study were friends of mine, people that I recruited to come in and so forth, because it took a certain amount of trust at this point, because we didn't have any real, other than the Russian studies, we didn't have any evidence. And so I would have to go to these friends of mine and say, I've got these pills that come from Russia, and
Right.
I would like if you to swallow these for a few years, and we'll see what happens in terms of your telomeres. I would appreciate it. So it was built on trust. But anyway, so I've known some of these people. And there is a general association represented in this bar chart with people's stress levels. Some of these were busy business people, etc., living in a lot of stress environment. And there seems to be a strong relationship, as shown here, in terms of stress and telomere acceleration. So the clinical study, the first 3 years of it, on average, the people in the study as a group had about almost a 22-year extension of their telomeres. In other words, their telomeres lengthened over that 3-year period. And the typical is, since the telomeres shorten with each cell replication over 3 years, people would normally be losing telomeres.
Right.
But this group of people experienced almost a 22-year, on average, increase in their telomere length. Okay, then a couple of 4 years ago, we started the methylation study, the epigenetic methylation study, because we wanted to see if we could use the peptide bioregulators to impact favorably gene expression. And this just explains to the people who are new to this what epigenetics are. They're all about turning on certain genes and turning off other genes that are related to longevity and so forth. We don't alter the DNA at all, but we can influence the functionality, or which genes are turned on and turned off. As it says here, epigenetic changes turn genes on and off. So what we were doing was measuring genes that were turned off methylation-wise versus those that would be turned on that are affiliated with longevity. And I have a little light switch here. The idea is that genes can be turned on and off at any given time, depending on what's going on in their life: diet, stress, exercise, sleep, so forth and so forth.
Right.
So we wanted to find out, can we turn on more of the longevity genes and turn off those genes that decrease longevity? And Cavinson had written this book, and you mentioned Phil Mikan, that you had interviewed. Cavinson and Phil and another scientist have written this book some years ago. I think it was in 2017, with regard to the epigenetic control of aging. In other words, we can use peptides to control people's epigenetic age situation. And the study that we were doing was going to prove that. This is just a published clinical study that Cavinson had done, where he talks about that the peptides are complementary binding to short nucleotide sequences, and that short peptides are effective in the epigenetic regulation of aging. In other words, they can be used to influence epigenetically the aging process. And this just simply shows, again, the docking, this a pancreas peptide, how they dock onto or cleave onto what we call the major groove of the DNA. And here we talk about, this is the mechanism of the action of how that works. And down here at the bottom in the yellow, peptides can regulate the status of DNA methylation. In other words, it can turn on and off epigenetically certain genes. David Sinclair, a well-known Harvard scientist and so forth, has said, he says, "I have little doubt that cellular reprogramming is the next frontier in research. One day it may be possible to reprogram cells by pills." Well, that was interesting that he would say that some years ago, because it's exactly what we're proving in the clinical study, the epigenetic clinical study, is that with pills, in this case peptide bioregulators, we can create cellular reprogramming, and the proof is what I'm going to show you coming up next. This just talks about aging clocks that have been produced now, where we can generally get some rough idea of a person's age, biological aging at this point. And we use primarily what's called the Horvath clock. At UCLA, Horvath and about 50 some odd other scientists worked for many, many years to be able to create a biological assessment based on looking at the epigenetic profile of an individual, again, which genes are turned on and off and so forth. And he talks about estimating a person's lifespan to some degree, and they don't use this as much, but they can actually predict within about a 2 or 3 year period the probable lifespan of an individual. Okay, it's called Grim age is the test that they use. It's not commercially very available, and so what he found was that each 1 year increase in epigenetic age above a person's chronological age, there's a 6% increase in the potential of cancer within 3 years for every 1 year epigenetically older, and 17% increased risk of dying of cancer in the next 5 years. Okay. So what his team figured out, and by the way, UCLA is where I went to law school, and I have a great appreciation for the quality of the education at the graduate schools there. What he found was, and his team found, was that if you are aging 8 years faster than your calendar age, that you have double the typical risk of dying. Okay. While if you're aging 7 years slower, you have half the risk of death compared to your same chronological peers. Okay, so 8 years, you're in trouble. 7 years, you're in a great place. Okay, 8 years faster, 7 years slower. So I built this graphic to kind of show this, and it's not as linear as it appears in this graphic by any means at all. But what it shows is the person's methylation or epigenetic mortality risk over a period of time. So you have an increased mortality risk. If you're 1 year older than your chronological epigenetically, you have about a 12% increased risk compared to your peers. On the other hand, if you're 7 years older, you have an 82% increased mortality risk compared to your same age peers. Now, the reverse of that is over here in the green. If you have if you're 1 year less than your chronological, if your epigenetic age is 1 year less, you have a 7% decreased mortality risk compared to your peers. If over here where it says 7, if you're 7 years less, you have a 50% reduced all-cause mortality risk than your peers. Okay, so those are the standards that we are using in the epigenetic clinical study. And so what we do is we measure people's epigenetics in order to figure out where they are on these continuums. And I've already shown this slide. In this clinical study, again, we use all 21 of the various peptides. There's actually the 22 of them at this point. So this is the test results that we get from different labs. This one is my DNA out of California. What this shows for an individual is September of 2019, this individual's DNA age, as we call it, was 2 years older. He was 55 epigenetically, okay? But his calendar age was 53. Okay. According to Dr. Horvath's research, it puts him at a 25% increase of all-cause mortality risk. So he's at risk somewhat greater than his same age peers. Then this is probably almost 2.5, 3 years later, February of 2021, after being on the peptide program, he is now chronologically 55, but we've been able to reduce his epigenetic age to less than his chronological age at 51.
Before we continue with this great discussion, I just want to take a quick break to acknowledge this week's sponsor. I'm constantly exploring new avenues to enhance well-being and address any health concerns. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce you to an exciting supplement called STEM Regen, which I take daily and genuinely believe could revolutionize your health journey as well. STEM Regen stands out as a game changer in the realm of wellness. Crafted from 5 potent plant extracts, it boasts a remarkable ability to stimulate the release of your body's own stem cells from your red bone marrow. Why is this significant? Well, stem cells are the superheroes of our body's natural repair system. They possess the extraordinary capacity to morph into various cell types, aiding in tissue regeneration and repair. As we age, the quantity of circulating stem cells in our system reduces significantly, impairing our body's ability to heal and rejuvenate itself effectively. Stem Regen steps in to counter this decline by kickstarting the release of stem cells into circulation, thereby bolstering your body's innate repair mechanisms. Once unleashed into your bloodstream, these mobilized stem cells actively seek out areas of damage or injury, initiating the healing process. By incorporating Stem Regen into your daily routine, you're essentially empowering your body to tap into its own regenerative prowess more efficiently. I firmly believe that Stem Regen could be a valuable addition to your wellness regimen, especially if you're seeking to fortify overall health and vitality, accelerate tissue repair, or expedite recovery from injury or illness. This first of its kind stem cell mobilizer is changing the game in regenerative medicine. Don't wait to unleash your body's innate healing capabilities. Visit stemregen.co/Dr. Steven, that's with a PH, and use the code SBPOD to get a 15% discount off your first order of Stem Regen. Hey Spelunkers, we're thrilled to kick off Season 6 with a fresh new look and the most exciting content we've ever delivered. This season, we're diving deep into the fascinating world of human optimization and understanding. But wait, there's more. We're giving back to our loyal listeners with an exclusive giveaway each and every episode of Season 6. That's right, prizes are waiting just for you. So how can you join in on this fun? Well, it's simple. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and here's the magic touch. Comment, "Let's Spelunk" on any of our Season 6 YouTube videos to enter. Of course, please add anything else you'd like to your review. Don't miss your chance to explore, learn, and win with the Pod of Inquiry. Let's spelunk into the wonders of Season 6 together.
At 51, he's 4 years less than his chronological age, and as a result, he has a 28% decreased all-cause mortality risk. So he's gone from a 25% increase 2.5 years later to a 28% decrease risk. This is another lab, True Diagnostic. This is Mark. His baseline he was 7 years older than his chronological age, 69, 90, and basically 70 versus 63 chronologically. Represents about an 82% increased risk of mortality. A couple of years on the program, and he was now 64, so about a year and a half on the program. His epigenetic age, or as this lab calls it, intrinsic age, became 48. So he went from 60, basically 70, to 48 in about a year and a half. Now his risk has decreased, and he's got a better than 100% decreased risk of all-cause mortality compared to his peers. This is Connie. I put this in here because this is very interesting. Connie was one of those trusted people who 7-8 years ago was willing to swallow the pills because she trusted me. And so she had been on the peptide bioregulators for 3 or 4 years before we started the epigenetic testing. And so her baseline, at age 77, her baseline, she was 8 years younger epigenetically, and it's because, I believe, it was because she had been on the peptides for 3 or 4 years at that point. So she had an excellent baseline. But she wanted to see, or we wanted to see, and she was willing to see what would happen if we just kept her on the program longer. So I think another 2 years went by or so. Let's see. Yeah. And so what happened is, over a period of a couple of years, we were able to, let me look here, get this correct, 20, about a year and a half. She went from 8 years below her chronological to 12 years below. In other words, we enhanced her more, or decreased her all-cause mortality risk at this point, even though she had a great baseline. Then a couple of years ago, about 2 years or so ago, the testing, as it is true in almost all scientific testing, improved, and we could actually get an epigenetic age, or what we call extrinsic age, of the person's immune system. That's what this is. This is an assessment of what their epigenetic age of their immune system is. And in this case, their immune system age was about 62, but they were 76 years of age. I think this is mine, as I recall. At this point, so I was, some 14 years younger in terms of my immune. As you'll see in a few moments, as the testing has advanced, we can even be more specific now. And this is one of those. So now it is possible for us to determine what a person's pace of aging is. So if we assume that a person's aging per year is 1.00 is the way that we mark it, okay, for every 12 months they're 1 year older. The issue is, are they aging faster than that biologically, or are they aging slower than that? And this was my test result about a year or so ago, as I recall. I'll show you in a different slide in a moment the series of getting here. At this point, my aging pace of aging was 21% slower than my chronological aging at 0.79. So we were able to slow my pace of aging. And this just basically shows the clock of how that's represented. Here, 12% fat, and this is not mine. This is someone else's. They were aging at baseline 12% faster than their chronological, and a couple of years after being in the epigenetic program, they're aging 10% slower. And this is that individual that I just showed you, the pace of aging. So this is a typical, over about a year and a half or so. This person's 2023 results baseline, he was 50. His DNA methylation, what we call the intrinsic, was 59, 9 years older than his chronological age. So he had accelerated aging epigenetically. His immune age was actually pretty good. It was 10 years less than his chronological age, but his pace of aging was accelerated. He was basically 12% faster each year aging biologically than his chronological. So a year and a half or so later, he was now 51 something. His intrinsic or DNA methylation age was 54. So he went from 59 to 54, so a reversal. And even his incredibly good immune age went from 40 to that of a 33-year-old. But most importantly, look at the change in his pace of aging, Stefan. He went from 12% faster to 10% slower than his chronological. Huge improvement. Okay. These are my results. Again, I was like Connie. I had been on the peptides for a number of years, 4 or 5, 6 years at that point. So in 2020, this is when we first started the epigenetic testing study. And the reason we started it in 2020 was that the commercial epigenetic testing became available at that point. Prior to that, you could only get it through universities, and it was incredibly expensive. Right. So my baseline, I was 73, but this lab called it true age, but basically my epigenetic age was that of a 69-year-old. So I was 4 years younger epigenetically, basically, than my chronological age. And then 2 years later, approximately, I was 75, and my epigenetic age was 65, basically. I was now 10 years less than my chronological. So I went from 4 years less to 10 years less in a period of about 18 to 20 months or so, even though I had a really excellent baseline to start with. And this is my pace of aging. This is really a primary biological age marker for us these days. If we can slow a person's biological aging, that is an incredible achievement. So this is a series over several years. In 2020, my pace of aging was very good at this point. It was 92%. In other words, 8% slower every year than my chronological aging. Again, I'd been on the peptides for 5 or 6 years at this point. We retested in 2021, and it dropped 1%, so I was now 9% slower. 2022, it was 89%, so I was 11% slower. And then more recently in 2024, I was 21% slower aging than my chronological. And as I mentioned, this came out just about 6 months ago. Testing has improved where we can take and get a pretty good epigenetic biological age. Again, I don't like that biological age. It's too broad, but an epigenetic age of a person's of 11 major organs and systems. So we've been able to go from the organism some years ago in entirety to a breakdown between the organism and the immune age, and now we've been able to test individual organs. And so in this case, this person's current age was 63, okay? Mm-hmm. And what we see here is that their liver age is 59, okay? Their brain age down here on the bottom is 61, but where you see the kind of red or orange circles and so forth, this is where there's accelerated aging of these specific organs. And so the person's metabolic age was 69. Yet they were 63, 6 years faster. Their musculoskeletal age was 70. Their inflammation age was 68. Their hormone age was 67. What this is so helpful for, as I mentioned earlier, when I create a protocol for someone for both telomeres and epigenetics, I now have this detailed information, and so I can focus in the creation of that protocol on those organs and systems that are aging faster epigenetically than the others. And so I will build in more peptides for these things that are organ related. Not all of them are organ related where the peptides can be useful, but it gives me a much more precise way of building that protocol. So the epigenetic DNA methylation study of about 4 years and so forth. I think there were 124 participants at that point, and the result was a 4.67 improvement in their epigenetic age in a period of 2 years. Now, compared to the telomeres, some people look at that and say, oh, well, you didn't do so well. It's apples and oranges. What we're doing with telomeres is changing the length of a person's telomeres. What we're doing with the epigenetics, Stefan, is we're reducing their all-cause mortality risk.
Right.
And so this 4.767 enhancement translates into a 56% decrease in all-cause mortality. I'm not aware, Stefan, of anything out there that has evidence behind it, data and evidence that can decrease people's mortality risk anything near this in a period of 2 years.
Yeah, the only question I have, Bill, and I had Hannah Went from True Diagnostic on the show a while back, so anybody who's listening to this, they can go back and listen to her take on the testing and everything. What's the correlation between some of these different, let's say, how close is a finding from True Diagnostic with someone like from another company? I mean, there's got to be a little bit of variance, right?
Yes, there is variance, and it really depends on the company. I have had to, both for the telomere, Stefan, as well as the DNA, I've had to screen all of these companies by sending multiple tests from the same person within a week or so of the retesting and so forth, in order to narrow down the ones that I think are the most accurate. As a result of that, I used SpectraCell for telomere testing. I use my DNA still for some of the epigenetic testing, but a lot of my testing is now with True Diagnostic, with Ryan and Hannah at this point. And when I retest with them, I'd say there's a variance of somewhere around 2 to 3, maybe sometimes 4 years. And so, but in the scheme of things, I'm not so concerned about having exact numbers as such. What I'm looking at is the trend. I want, over a period of 4 or 5 years, for me anyway, I want to see improvement, as I've shown in some of those slides.
Right.
But True Diagnostic is clearly the leading commercial. Second to that is My DNA. They're both good companies. Okay, mortality reduction. Now, this is not anything that I've done because, for mortality studies take a lot of time in terms of, this is from the work that Cavinson has done. This is a published study. I'm going to show you, this is too complicated to go through and read. I'm going to show you the actual graphic results of this, but there were 266 people in the study. The duration of the study study was 6 to 8 years. Interesting, they only used the peptides for 2 to 6 years, and depending on which study. They didn't use them constantly. And here's the graphic that shows what the results were. So in this group called elderly people, age 60 to 74, where it says in the middle, the controlled polyvitamins, this is the mortality rate of the non-peptide group, where the next line over where it says administration pineal gland peptide, this is the group taking a peptide, one peptide, the pineal gland. So polycontrolled people were the control. If we go down to the mortality rate in the course of 12 years, 44% of these people died. Now, these were Russians and Ukrainian people and so forth, living kind of in a harsh environment and so forth. So for that part of the world, that's not unusual. So 44% of these people died non-peptide, using one peptide over the course of 12 years. And again, they only used them, I think, in the 12-year study for about 4 years. The mortality rate was 22%. Basically, they reduced the mortality group
by half
with one peptide in half. Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's go on to the next group. The Russians are not the most diplomatic at times, and so we would never call the old people group, but that's what they have in the clinical study. This is 75 to 89, and this is the group I'm in. I'm 78 now at this point. And they now just use 2 peptides. Okay, they use the pineal gland peptide and they use the thymus peptide for the immune system. And again, there's 21 of these now. These testing was done back about 1998, 1999. So in the control group here, if we jump to both the peptide, say the thymus and the pineal gland, the control group, 81.8% of these people died over the period of 6 years. Again, that part of the world and that age bracket and so forth and so forth. So basically 82% of the control group died over that 6-year period of time. Jumping over to the thymus and pineal gland, the mortality rate was 33%.
Wow. Significant.
So they went from 82% mortality to 33% mortality. And the interesting thing is that in the 6-year study, they only used the peptides for the first 2 years. And then there was no peptide usage for the next 4 years, and then they gathered their data at that point.
Wow. And now a message from our sponsor. Well, folks, if you are over 40 and you are not using a supplement to augment nitric oxide production, you should really rethink that. This molecule is absolutely imperative to the health of so many bodily functions, not the least of which is cardioprotection. If you have any question on nitric oxide, I suggest that you register with Approved Medical Solutions and begin receiving their educational emails. I never miss a day of nitric oxide supplementation. That's how important it is. Long overdue, Approved Medical Solutions created the only nitric oxide replenishment formula without oxalates. Approved Medical Solutions does not use beet, spinach, or arginine. Approved Medical Solutions is proud to offer our audience their oxalate-free nitric oxide formula. If you are not a healthcare provider, you can still get started by going to approvedmedicalsolutions.com and use the code SBarrett at checkout, and you will receive a 10% medical discount savings. You can register to receive educational emails without any purchase. For licensed practitioners, you too can go to approvedmedicalsolutions.com and get registered today. They have unique bundles for all of the full-fledged spelunkers of the Pod of Inquiry. Use Pod of Inquiry at checkout after registration. Here's a little secret. If you order their testing strips and test every patient for a few clinic days, you will see every one of them be deficient. When they see this result, they will want you to start them up immediately. Now, thanks to Approved Medical Solutions, you can give them the best care without the worry of oxalates.
That's the benefit of organ regeneration. This is just a graph of that same thing. You know, significant epithalamin, the one peptide for the pineal gland, and the epithalamin plus thymolin for the thymus considerable reduction in mortality, of course. They also did, Cavinson did a morbidity study, and he did it with up in Siberia with Gazprom, which is Russia's primary oil gas operation, and so forth. They had 11,000 people in the group, of which the control group just taking regular vitamins, not peptides. 3,000 of the people on the control group, about 9,000, 8 to 9,000 in the peptide group. What they discovered after 1 year was that there was a significant reduction in morbidity, that is sickness, and a lot of it was respiratory disease, as you would expect in that part of the world. These are oil field workers and so forth. So in terms of acute respiratory disease, there was a reduction of 2.7 times in the group taking the peptides. In total morbidity, sickness of all causes, 2 to 3 times reduction.
That's really interesting.
This is the Hayflick limit. The point of this is there's a significant increase in the number of times that the cells can divide. Dr. Hayflick, who just died just a few months ago, I think, as I recall, was the one American scientist had determined how many times a cell could basically replicate. Cavinson published showing that he could increase that by about 25%, that cell replication. What his animal studies and his human studies have shown is, again, this is Russia, average lifespan is 75 to 80 years. With all of the various peptides that he using, his studies show basically that he can add 35 to 40 years based on the gene expression and telomeres and so forth. He can add 35 to 40 healthy years to that, and that's the expectation that he has, that I have. Organ regeneration. This one is amazing. This is again Cavinson's work. They have a vision or retina clinic there at the St. Petersburg Institute, where they exclusively treat retinal diseases, and people come in literally from all over the world for these treatments using peptides. So these are scans. I'll show them to you individually. Where you see more green, that's where they have sight. Dark colors, red colors, where they have limited sight. They were testing for diabetic retinopathy, age-related macular degeneration, retinitis pigmentosa, and the close-ups are as follows. Diabetic retinopathy. Baseline here, you see a lot of red, a lot of black, and yellow and so forth. A couple of years, and I don't know exactly how long, but a couple of years of treatment, the green shows improvement. This person has dramatically enhanced their vision at this point. And you can look at the scotoma. The numbers have improved very significantly. These are obstacles to vision. I forget the medical term for it. You may know. It's things that form on the eye that basically interfere with vision. I forgot the exact term.
I don't know that, but when I first started learning about the retina scans that I read about from Cavinson were one of the most, I guess, significant things that I could see, because this was really pretty objective data. And it's not just a VAS pain scale where the patient has an 8 out of 9 pain and goes down to a 4 or 5 out of 10 pain. So this was one of the first things that said, wow, this stuff really has a lot of merit from a scientific standpoint, because it's an objective measure. Yeah,
these field of vision tests, what I call them, are very dramatic. So here we have macular degeneration, and as you know, and I think a lot of people know, in the U.S. there's very little that can be done with a diagnosis of macular degeneration or even retinitis pigmentosa. There are some eye drops that the doctors use and so forth that hopefully will slow the progression a little bit. But here we have the before with, black, yellow, red, and so forth. After a couple of years of treatment, we end up with this situation where this person can probably more or less have, the better part of a vision life at this point. And you can actually see the numbers here where they changed, improved, and so forth. And then we get to retinitis pigmentosa, which is one that I'm very interested in. You can see here black. every place in red and so forth. And then after a couple of years of treatment, a lot of green and so forth. This one is of interest to me because when I first learned about peptides, I had a family where I was living, some friends knew them, who had two sons. Retinitis pigmentosa is an inherited disease that typically kind of skips a generation and so forth. And so two brothers, teenagers at that point, I think they were 16 and 13 or something of that nature. Both the brothers had been diagnosed in the same year with retinitis pigmentosa. And it's a progressive disease, as these others are. And what people have described to me is that over a period of time, it's like you're looking through a telescope, and then finally you're looking through a straw, and then finally the straw closes and you have no vision at all. Mm-hmm. So these boys, they came to me, and I said, I'm not a doctor, but I knew about these studies and so forth. I said, go talk to your doctor, and if your ophthalmologist is willing to experiment a little bit, these are sourced from animals. They're 100% natural extracts. There's no adverse side effects and so forth. And the doctor's position was, I don't know anything about these, but you're free to take them, but I can't tell you yes or no, etc. The typical disclaimer that you would expect. So the boys went on the peptides. Within 6 months, they reported, just subjectively, that their night vision had improved. Then at the annual testing, there was some noticeable improvement, and then they've been tested ever since, and it's been about 10 years at this point. They have excellent vision, both of them, to my chagrin, but not too surprised. Their ophthalmologist has never really said, is this due to the peptides?
Right.
Because, peptide, people with these vision issues, they don't stay the same. They don't, it's a progressive disease. But these boys now have a full life. They're driving cars, they have careers, they have families and so forth. They're in their mid-20s at this point. They would have been blind, totally blind several years ago.
Yeah.
So I call this the bridge. The peptide bioregulators are powerful. They are, I think, probably for longevity anyway, they are the most powerful intervention that we have available to us at this point. There are some other interventions that have some science behind them, but nothing quite as dramatic as this. And they're safe. As I say, they're food extracts and so forth. They're not overly expensive. But it is not the end all. And what I mean by that is, I look at these peptide bioregulators and the people that have achieved, telomere lengthening and epigenetic modification. I look at it as a part of what I call the bridge, and that is, basically the things that are being worked on now, many of them, Stefan, that you would be aware of, the things that are aging, longevity, aging interventions and so forth, stem cells and so forth and so forth. A number of those are going to turn out to be very helpful. Okay, most of it's in sort of the experimental with limited research at this point, limited evidence and so forth. But the idea behind the bridge is that we have to remain and obtain as much health as we can at this point, such that we're still healthy 10 years from now, in order to take advantage of the things that may be developed during the next 10 years. And those things are things like a lot of that research is being bankrolled by billionaires at this point who have reached, they're 50, 60, 70, 80 years of age and so forth, and they realize that their health is much more important than their wealth, and so they're they're bankrolling a lot of these clinical studies. And I think last time I heard, there were something like 700 foundations and organizations working on longevity around the world, and a lot of them are being bankrolled by very wealthy people. And what they're working on in terms of what I call the bridge are these kinds of things. We're already seeing artificial intelligence being introduced into the medical health field. Excuse me. CRISPR, genome sequencing, stem cells, replacement of organs, of course, has been on for a while. Robotics, nanotechnology, 3D printing. The idea here, and these are some of the foundations and labs that are doing some of that work, Calico and so forth and so forth. The idea is, stay as healthy as we possibly can, use peptide bioregulators, use calorie restriction, use other nutraceutical interventions, use maybe the stem cells that are in their infancy at this point. Plasma exchange maybe is a possibility in order to stay alive and healthy, so that we can take advantage of all the stuff that's coming down the road. So I show this to people. This is basically the paradigm that most of us live with. We're young and healthy, and then we're adulthood, and then we get older and we become frail and have medical problems and so forth. Professor Cabbinson and I believe in something entirely different. We believe that through telomeres, DNA methylation, epigenetic modification, create this paradigm instead, such that as we get older, and of course the starting point should be here in the middle when we're still very healthy. Right. But even a person that is, aged somewhat, if you can use the peptides, stay alive and healthy for the next 10 years to take advantage of what's coming, we believe that this paradigm is very realistic. And there are 8 or 10 other YouTubes, Stefan, that about, that people, if they want to read or look at more of the detail and so forth, that are available to them. So that's the peptide program. That's the result of the studies. We're now creating what we call a peptide longevity protocol, rather than people enrolling them in the actual studies and so forth. We've got so much data proving that the peptide bioregulators can do what I just showed you, that we're offering it as a program for people who want to enhance their longevity.
And Bill, what I'll do in the show notes is put this in there so that we can direct people to you that are interested in this.
I appreciate that. And Stefan, that you use the right word, so you can direct people. I need you to screen people. I cannot have my email and my contact information ever put out there. I would be overwhelmed.
No, I understand. Well, Bill, that's fascinating. I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing this. I mean, this is a big project, and what you've done is really not only astounding, but it's very important because, like you said at the beginning of your presentation, you presented data, and data is really everything in this type of a scenario. And I think, for me, when I started hearing about this, I thought, well, this is really too good to be true. I was very skeptical about it. And then I started getting, some of Cabbison's studies, and I looked at the retinal scans. And when I saw the retinal scans, it's like, wait, that's almost like an MRI. It's a totally objective measurement. And so when I saw that, now, way on top of that, orders of magnitude on top of that, your work has really showed some incredible things. And, I think this is the wave of the future. And it's certainly something that I would think almost everybody who's walking the planet would want to have interest in, because it's just everybody wants to have a better health span and a longer lifespan, and hopefully they correlate really closely. So this is, one of the ways that people can achieve that. So thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. I think that, our audience is going to appreciate this so much.
It's been my pleasure, Stefan. I have it's interesting. I told you that every 10 years I change careers.
Yeah.
I've been 30 years at this, and I wake up every morning just as passionate about it.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. And
you bet.
Hopefully we can cross paths again in the near future.
Excellent. Thanks, Stefan.
All right. As you know, I'm passionate about learning new ways to address health concerns. Moreover, before I recommend any treatment or supplement, I always try it on myself. Today, I want to share my experience with Troche. I have investigated other phytocannabinoid formulas and found that, in general, they were not consistent or reliable in their results. What impressed me about the Troche delivery technology is that each rapid-release tab is engineered to provide fast-acting, long-lasting, reliable delivery of phytocannabinoids to support your health and well-being. Many physicians understand the importance of using phytocannabinoids for physical discomfort, sleep issues, and mood. But if the formula is not reliable, most patients will give up, never experiencing the real benefits. I put this to the test on myself and actually tracked my progress. This graph shows my results for reducing stress. Troche is so serious about how well their product works They partnered with People Science to provide the Troche Tracker health assessment application that lets you monitor your progress and works with you to accomplish your wellness goals. If you are a patient, click the link below and the patient button to register for Troche Tracker. Assess your baseline health metrics and receive a free Troche sample in addition to getting preferred patient pricing on all products. If you are a clinician interested in adding Troche to your practice, click the link below and then the clinician button to register for a wholesale affiliate account or go to the link above. I hope you all enjoyed today's show and got some truly empowering knowledge out of it. You can always follow up on anything we talked about in the show notes found at our website, podofinquiry.com. If you think you might have tickled just a few neurons inside that cerebral cortex, please spread the word to your friends and colleagues and tell them that they need to get spelunking. Also, if you can take a minute to leave a review on your podcast provider of choice, and especially Apple Podcasts, that would greatly help the show and be so appreciated, provided it's positive. And if not, then just keep your pie hole shut and stay down in that cave. Let's keep spelunking.
This podcast is designed for informational purposes only and does not constitute any medical or surgical consulting advice or imply a development of any physician-patient relationship. The opinions of guests who are featured on the show are not necessarily the opinions of Dr. Barrett or the production team. This podcast is owned solely by Barrett Medical and Surgical Media, LLC. While the show is highly oriented for physicians and healthcare providers, anyone interested in the improvement of human performance and understanding will find us a welcome goblet to sip from, or guzzle. However, no representation or warranties are made in any way whatsoever on this podcast for any products, techniques, or other things discussed. Invited guests are not vetted by the Pod of Inquiry for their qualifications and may have a direct or indirect financial interest in what they present and discuss on the show. The Pod of Inquiry disclaims any responsibility from anything taken from the show and used personally or professionally. It is a responsibility of the listener to perform their own due diligence prior to the implementation of any ideas, products, techniques, or anything talked about on the show.